Have you ever heard the saying, "Don't rain on my parade"? It's a common expression, but what you may not realize is that you're also quoting a very famous song from the 1964 musical Funny Girl, and this song was one of the big showstoppers sung by the one and only Barbra Streisand. Funny Girl was a Broadway success, nominated for 8 Tony Awards, including Best Musical and Best Lead Actress. The show ran for 3 years on Broadway until 1967, totaling 1,348 performances. The film adaptation, also starring Babs, was released 4 years later in 1968. It became a box office hit, earning 8 Academy Award nominations, with Barbra winning Best Actress. Funny Girl tells the sorta, kinda true-ish story of the real Fanny Brice, a Jewish-American turn-of-the-century comedy trailblazer and one of the biggest stars of her time. Fanny wasn't interested in performing the same old female archetypes, which were often not very interesting to play. Instead, she parodied her own vulnerabilities. Needy, romantic, neurotic, insecure. You get the idea. She also wasn't afraid to acknowledge she didn't fit the typical beauty standard. In fact, Fanny was constantly pressured into getting a nose job to cover her ethnicity. Big yikes. To be fair, she did famously describe herself as a bagel on a plate full of onion rolls. Fanny could give a masterclass in self-mockery, and she performed it with precision. In the Funny Girl movie, there's a famous roller skating number where she pretends to be a total disaster while professional skaters glide effortlessly around her. Although Fanny never performed this number in real life, it's a great illustration of her bold choices. She certainly was a titan, but getting her story in front of an audience was a decade in the making. It started with Fanny's daughter, Frances Brice, marrying big-time Hollywood producer Ray Stark. After hearing Fanny's life story, Ray could see potential for something. But what? Unfortunately, Fanny suddenly passed away in 1951. But with Frances and Ray inheriting her estate, which included the rights to her story, the project marched on with their creative control. Ray commissioned many screenplays for a biopic over the course of 10 years, but all of them fell short until screenwriter Isobel Lennart pitched her script titled My Man. Bingo! We have a winner, folks. After reading the script, Broadway royalty Mary Martin pitched the idea that the story could work as a musical. Ray's eyes lit up. What better way to immortalize Fanny's legacy than with a musical extravaganza? But it wasn't long before a few parades were rained on, so to speak. Let's put it this way. Ray didn't become successful by playing it safe. Like Fanny, he was a risk-taker. You see, Broadway at the beginning of the 60s was already full of big hits we still love today with big names like Julie Andrews as Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, Barbara Cook as Marion in The Music Man, Mary Martin, yeah, that Mary, as Maria in The Sound of Music, Julie Andrews again as Guinevere in Camelot. You get the picture. There was a look. These characters were strong but soft, demure and romantically ideal. There weren't any female characters like Fanny shown on the stage. Funny, while emotionally complex, vulnerable, and brave as hell. To center a character like Fanny was innovative, but dicey. On top of that, live theater was facing a big problem: television. Dun dun dun! By 1960, almost every American home owned a TV, and evening programs like The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and The Ed Sullivan Show were replacing live entertainment. Even musicals were getting televised. Then, on top of that, Americans were facing a recession, which meant the cost of putting on big Broadway productions had gone up, which meant expensive theater tickets, which meant fewer tourists, which meant even fewer New Yorkers taking chances on new shows. Yeah, a Fanny Brice musical was even more of a risk. But the biggest challenge? Casting Fanny. That was a tall order. The actress playing Fanny had to be able to sing, dance, have unreal comedic timing, and carry an entire show. Oh, and she had to be Jewish. Oh, and she had to have an unconventional appearance. Anything else would undermine Fanny's story. There were some heavy hitters up for the role, like Anne Bancroft and Mary Martin. After all, she pitched the idea. But these women were drop-dead gorgeous, and neither of them were Jewish. Then came Eda Gourmet, who was seemingly perfect, Jewish, had the look, the skill, but she came with a condition. She wanted her husband, Steve Lawrence, to play Nick Arnstein, the character based on Fanny's real-life husband, and the romantic lead of the show. But producers agreed that Steve didn't fit the part, so out walked Eda. Carol Burnett was also up for the role, but she declined, agreeing that the part should go to a Jewish actor. The project came to a standstill until music composer Julie Stein famously said, "I found the girl." One night, at the Bonsoir Club in Greenwich Village, Julie was blown away by an unknown singer who dominated the club in shabby clothes with her powerhouse voice. That girl was Barbra Streisand. Ray wasn't convinced until he heard her for himself. The other producers were nervous, another risk. But when Barbra got into the audition room, she quickly proved to the other doubtful producers she was the only choice. She was the essence of Fanny, and she was Jewish. Coincidentally, Barbra would also be urged in her career to get a nose job. Sense a pattern here? So, what is Funny Girl about? The play opens with Fanny, already a huge star, sitting in her dressing room before going on stage, reflecting on her beginnings in show business. We're taken back in time to when Fanny was young and determined to get her big break. Despite constant reminders that beauty matters more than talent, Fanny's tenacity grows while working at Keeney's Music Hall. And it's there she meets the very charismatic Nick Arnstein, a professional gambler. Fanny is smitten. She finally gets her big break when she lands a job in the Ziegfeld Follies, the glamorous musical revues created by Florenz Ziegfeld Jr. The Follies were famous for showcasing beautiful chorus women, the Ziegfeld girls, in lavish costumes while parading and flouncing around on elaborate sets. Fanny, who clearly doesn't fit that image, stands out immediately. When she's given her first featured number, His Love Makes Me Beautiful, Fanny knows the song doesn't suit her. If you experienced constant criticism about your appearance, this choice would probably make you uncomfortable too. So instead of performing it sincerely, Fanny appears on stage as a pregnant bride. Cheeky, but the audience loves it, and her career takes off. So we're clear, Fanny getting her break at Ziegfeld Follies? True. Being reminded by her peers and even her mother that she wasn't a beauty? Also true. The pregnant bride stunt? Not true. But it's another strong portrayal of Fanny's comedic spirit. Soon, Fanny and Nick fall in love and get married. Unfortunately, this is the beginning of the end for the lovebirds. As Fanny's fame and fortune grows, so too does Nick's insecurities. After all, what is a man if not the provider within a marriage? And back then, this would have been embarrassing. A man's masculinity was everything, and boy, was it fragile. So now, Nick's judgment on, let's say, his financial dealings becomes clouded. His biggest and shadiest deal lands him in prison for his involvement in the theft of millions of dollars worth of bonds. Dang, Nicky! He tells Fanny they must divorce to protect her public image. What a hero. Fanny, although heartbroken, is determined to pick herself up and go on with the show. The real story? Nick Arnstein was far less noble, to put it politely. The bond theft was real, and the media was relentlessly covering the trial, putting Fanny's marriage in the spotlight, including Nick's multiple affairs. After his release from prison, Nick didn't visit Fanny or their daughter, Frances, very often, if at all. Yep, the same Frances who married the Hollywood producer. But the divorce? That was Fanny's decision. And there you have it. Wild ride, eh? In the end, Funny Girl isn't just about a woman who refused to let anyone rain on her parade. It's about who gets to have a parade in the first place. And Fanny's story comes full circle. Doubted by the industry and dismissed for not fitting its standards, she still triumphed. And not just in her career or through Funny Girl, but through Barbra, too. These two powerhouses are just two of many who march forward with resilience against adversity, proving that vulnerability can be powerful, difference can be currency, and confidence outshines convention. Moreover, the history of Funny Girl also forces us to ask, who gets to tell these stories and what responsibility comes with shaping them? Representation carries weight because the stories we choose to spotlight and those we pick to tell them matter. And it could inspire who steps into the parade next.